And there we go. If I'm correct, we are live at the moment on YouTube. Hey guys, welcome. My name is Frank Dorov and welcome in our home actually, because we're not in the studio today. Today we are going to do something special, but first we're always going to ask you guys, how is the audio? Is the audio okay, or do you hear some weird stuff? We're constantly trying to improve the audio. So at the moment we have a nice compressor on, so the audio should be a little bit more leveled out. Okay, today something special. Now, a few weeks ago, we did a trade show in Belgium called Photo Days, and it was an awesome Photo Days, of course, very busy and a great audience. And during the Photo Days, I did a presentation called a photo shoot with not a really big budget. And people were literally lining up to outside of the area. So a lot of people actually missed that seminar. And we got a lot of disappointment. So we don't want to disappoint people. So I said, you know what, join us for our next digital classroom. And at that point, we will create something specially for you. We're going to do the whole seminar again, but now via the digital classroom. So I hope you guys are ready, because it's time for a digital classroom. And we are back. Now, as you can see, we have several supporters that make Digital Classroom possible, including, of course, BenQ for many years, Rogue, and, of course, Calibrite and Cascable. But those are our new brands, and those are actually our own brands. Click Backdrops, of course, Gkoto, and of course also Rogue and IQ Wire. So if you want to know anything about those brands, just hit me up over an email or personal message and we will give you answers on those. But today it's all about a big photo shoot on not so big budget. So let's switch over to our keynote presentation. There we go. So now I'm really small. Okay, so today it's about that one thing that can literally just convert your photo shoot into something that's a little bit more special. So let's start. Okay, the first thing that I always tell people to do is find your classics. Because let's be honest, the classics are where all the information is. And I don't really mean classics like this. This was shot during one of our cosplay workshops, and of course cosplay workshops are always a huge amount of fun. But most of all, I love to create characters, and this is also something that I love to do during my workshops and photo shoots. I don't want to just capture somebody, I want to capture the presence of somebody, the character. So in this case, it's a little bit of a joke, know your classics. Of course, I'm more aiming towards the real classic photography. Think about Harcourt, George Hurrell, all those really old photographers. They knew how to shoot. And why? Well, look at this image. We're not just shooting it with a big ass softbox. We are actually using controlled lighting, using flags, Fresnel spots, and whatnot more. You can create such beautiful images by that. Sometimes I call it really close lighting, like intimate lighting. And of course, you don't need to take it in black and white. Why not create something that's a little bit more in color, for example, for the modern days? And in this case, we shot this one for black and white. And then we converted it back into color. And of course we didn't convert it back into color. It was intended to be shot in black and white, and I just love the color version so much that I also kept the color version. And then that's the nice thing. You can combine all those techniques from the old days with, of course, your modern day technology. And why not, right? If you love color photography, use those old-fashioned flags, Fresnels, and create some high-stunning, high-fashion portraiture. Why not? Everything is possible nowadays. This one was actually shot with a very, very low budget. And actually, you might think a low budget, and it's actually not. Now, when I realize it, this was done with the ice light and barn doors. Now, I say on a low budget because in essence, it's just a fluorescent tube with some barn doors. And you can do it with LED lighting. And you can do it with a normal fluorescent tube. And in this case, of course, I use the ice light. And the ice light from Westcott is, of course, a little bit more expensive. But you can do it with any light source that you want. If you can just block off that light with, for example, barn doors. Or be creative with cardboard or whatever you want to use. As long as you create a very slim shiver of light where you can light your model, as you can see here. And the red gloves, they were purely an accident. We told Manon, like, hey, go into the box and find something cool to wear. And she came back like with these red gloves. And I was going like, wow, that looks really nice. Where did you find those? Yeah, in the box. And I was going like, okay. So place the light on it and it really jumps out. So I love that shot. Another thing, of course, that's very important to create first that mood in your images. Later we're going to talk about budget, is the angles. Now, all landscape photographers know leading lines, of course. Those are very important in your image. If you don't have leading lines, well, the image doesn't really work. So how does that work with model photography? We can also use leading lines. We can use leading lines in our backdrops, but we can also use leading lines as our angles. Now, let's take a look at, for example, this shot. It's interesting. It's not something where you go like, holy wow, this is amazing, but it's interesting. Now, as soon as you start switching it over, you can see that the angle, it changes everything. This is a little bit more from the top. But what if you just shoot it from an angle, and in this case also use a wide angle? Do you see the difference between those shots? So this is pretty standard. And you go one further, and you go a little bit more up, and then from the side with that wide angle. And I think those wide angles are often regarded as not interested for model photography. When somebody asks me like, hey, what is the perfect portrait lens? They always expect answers like, hey, it's the 85, or it's the 80, or it's 200, but they don't expect me to say, hey, it's a 24-70. By the way, in between the audio isn't clipping for you guys, it's okay, because over here I see it's a little bit clipping. So I'm just want to check with you guys, because I can turn it down just a little bit here. Let me try that for now. So let me turn it down. Now it's not clipping anymore. I think this will sound a little bit better. Okay, so when we look at wide angles and different angles, I love to work with wide angles a little bit closer to the model's feet, and that will make those legs a lot longer. And do remember one thing, the camera doesn't see any depth. The only thing that it sees is something that's closer to the camera, it will render bigger. So that means that when you are working with a wide angle, you know it's going to distort. And when you know it's going to distort, you can do two things. One, you can try to prevent it and go like, hey, I don't want to distort it because it looks weird. Or you can just embrace it and go like, okay, if it's going to distort, I'm going to use it to my advantage and really going to do something with it. And that's what I love to do with those wide angles. So let me just switch that over. I love wide angles for playing around with perspective. Yes, let me see, whole photo. You are absolutely right. Those wide angles, as you can see here, those are absolutely stunning. And you can literally just sit on the floor in your studio, just aim the camera up to the ceiling, and there you go. It's, yeah, the sky is the limit. Sometimes they say, well, in this case, the sky really is the limit. But also from a higher perspective. Now, I'm a little bit afraid of height, so wide angles really help me, because with the 200mm, that would be terrible for me. But anyway, you get the drift, right? You just stand on a ladder and you just shoot down and you get something really weird. And of course, with a wide angle, you are also allowed to sit on the floor and just shoot into your scene. And that creates something that you can't do with a normal lens, is that you have that wideness. So in this case, for example, we have the ear warmers, we have the little bag from Nadine, and we have Nadine in the distance. If I would use a wider, a more narrower lens, let's say for example a 50 or a 70, at that point when I move further back, everything will be compressed, so you never get that really nice depth, like it's pulled apart. And that's what I love about those wide angles. And of course that lower angle really helps in this case. Now the thing that you have to be careful for when you're using wide angles and under certain lower angles, so I'm talking about angles constantly, but I mean of course the wide angle is the lens, and the angle under which you shoot is, for example, lower angle or higher angle or from the sides. Now when you look at our backdrop here, you can see that we're actually using that wide angle also to enhance those lines in the back. And this is something that I found very, very difficult to do at first, and still sometimes really mess this up. And what I try to do is always get that middle line even, because somehow when that's a little bit screwed, I go like, I don't really like this. And the other lines will immediately just fall into place. Now, as soon as you start shooting into a scene, like from an angle, I always find this really weird. It just, we in the Netherlands call it wringen. It doesn't really feel right, but you look at it and you draw all the angles and you go like, yeah, it feels right, but it doesn't look right. And this is why when I'm shooting into a scene, I will often just do it very extremely, just go all the way to the side. And then when you see all the lines going away, like, okay, this was intended. So it's the same with shooting symmetry. I hate to shoot symmetry because there's always somebody that goes like, hey, do you know that you're 1 or 2 pixels off? And I go like, I don't know. So I always shoot it intentionally out of symmetry. And I think with leading lines, I think the best tip I can give you is don't try to force it to get it 100% right. Make it 80% right or make sure that it is 100% right. So nothing in between, because that will really mess you up when you look at that image. And here again, using that wide angle. Now, I love doing this kind of stuff, and they never actually hit my camera, luckily. But anyway, just let your model kick towards your camera a little bit on the side, and with a little bit of timing, you are very lucky if you can get it like this. This is maybe when I do this 100 times, I get it once like this. So I was really fortunate to get it. It's, you want to get the foot really in 100%. Let me see. I think when leading lines get warped by wide angles, it makes it feel a little bit strange, not always in a good way. Yes, that's absolutely true. When you use wide angles, sometimes you also have a pincushion, or I think that's one of the things, and that works for me with fashion photography. And I've seen some wide angles that really just extend that image, and I go, no, that's not the one that I like. I really like it a little bit less distorted. But this part, so literally just getting stuff closer and further away, that I love to have a little bit more distorted. Okay, we're getting a message from YouTube. Thank you so much. Photo says he's a huge fan of my work, and that's something that I love to hear, of course. Thank you so very much. Another thing that you can do with wide angles is, of course, also try to incorporate props in your studio. Like, for example, we have a prop here, and I don't know the correct name for it, but it was with our neighbors for, I think, a few months, and they couldn't sell it. And he tried it on Marktplaats, eBay, and there was just no selling. And we shot some images in the studio, and I think 1 or 2 weeks later he sold it. And this is also how important an image can be for selling your products. So in other words, we are the distributor for Rogue, for example, and we recently did a shot with our color gels. And you can, of course, just lay them on a product table, just shoot it against a white backdrop. And I don't like this. And we get the same thing. I don't want this. He said, I want something where you lay it on the table and we get some lights from the back and some colors. So in the end, for just a simple product shot, we decided to create something a little bit more interesting. So we could have done the shot in 10 seconds. But instead we spent 15, 20 minutes and then later a little bit in Photoshop to get everything even. And I think that's the part. If you do that with products and you do that with your model photography, you will get better results from your clients. I guarantee it. And of course it sells easier. Same thing, low angles. I just love working with those. Okay, now this is one of the things that is interesting, I think. This was shot in Las Vegas with Joe McNally and Cirque du Soleil. And we both shot the same image. And Joe actually shot it this way. This was how it was set up. So black backdrop and those beautiful curtains. And I just asked him, like, hey, do you mind if I lay on the floor and shoot it like this? Now, both images, in my opinion, are 100% great. And I think the one how it was set up with the black backdrop is actually the most safest, and also the one where you can see the artist the best. My shot is a little bit more creative. And I think it's all depending on what your client wants and, of course, what you want. If you want a more creative shot, you do it like this. If the client goes like, no, I want to really show the people what's going on during the night and I want to show her the artist, then you take the other shot. So it depends on where you need the shots for. Okay, let's go for artificial intelligence. Now, of course, a lot of people will go with artificial intelligence and go like, hey, I don't like artificial intelligence and it will destroy photography. Yeah, well, you know, they said the same thing about photography will be destroyed when they started doing the clone tool and the healing brush and whatnot more. I think we should just embrace it. Now, the thing that I hate about artificial intelligence is the just typing in Viking running away from a burning village screaming. No, there's no creativity there. But I think as soon as you start using it in Photoshop and you think ahead about what you want to do and what you want to show, I think artificial intelligence can be absolutely amazing. Now, in between, I will ask Anouk if there's still a nice stream, because I'm getting some reports that YouTube doesn't have enough smooth streaming information. But over here, we have everything on 100%, so it's probably something from YouTube. So let's switch over to here. Now, the whole image was planned during a workshop. This was shot with Gabe, an American student. He came over for a one-on-one workshop, 3 days, amazing guy, and we had an amazing good time in our studio. And everything was planned about this. The only thing that I didn't plan was, of course, the sand. I wanted her on a sand planet. Everything else was exactly the way that I wanted it. So we choose some soft lighting because this is the old Star Trek, right? The original series. And then when I started typing it in Photoshop, adding sand, adding everything, it ended up with this. And I was just going like, wow, this is amazing. Let's do it. But as you can see here, the planets, the backdrop, it really gives that old vibe. Now, talking about planning ahead, everything in this shot was planned, except, of course, the artificial intelligence. So I had this in my mind, like, okay, I want blue light from the left, I want red light from the right, he's running through a corridor, we want some smoke, we want to hold a phaser, he has to hold it like this because I want a lens flare coming out. I think when you do it like that, artificial intelligence will help you get your clients, because you can do stuff like this with cosplayers that nobody else can do. Because this is not just replacing a backdrop. This is thinking ahead like a film director. This is my artist, this is a green screen. But are all green screens fake? No. You can't create a science fiction city. You have to do that with a green screen, right? But you still have to imagine that city. You still have to build everything up. Like everything you see in this image is built up. Every corridor is built up. Every light that you see is created in artificial intelligence. And that's what I like about Photoshop. It doesn't just let you create a whole image and that's it, or stable diffusion. Photoshop, literally, you have your image and then around that image you start to build everything. And I think that's a totally different way of working. Same here. And for example, this shot, we are still using our own backdrops. Remember this, we don't change the backdrops. So this is my Lara Croft impression during one of our cosplay workshops. And what you see here is our art botanical backdrop, but we didn't have any snakes. We did have a whip, and what we did is we used a background system from paper, and we just placed it in our studio, placed the whip above it, and the only thing I said to Jamila was, okay, on 3, 1, 2, 3, just stand on your toes. So 1, 2, 3, stand on your toes, take the shot. And I knew that the lighting would have to come from above. So what we used is a small softbox, placed it above our model, aimed it down. And the only thing I did after that in Boris FX is actually create a little bit of dust particles, and everything else is artificial intelligence. Add snakes, add the backdrop, add the the top part, add some spider webs. So there's, I think, at least 10 or 20 elements here that was typed in separately and just added to the scene. And again, at that point, is it really artificial intelligence? Yes, it is. But what's the difference between paying for stock photography that isn't 100% that you want, or using artificial intelligence and getting 100% what you want? Same here, everything is real. The backdrop, the seat, the model, the floor is real, but the thing on the floor, the floor cloth, the floor, what? You know what I mean, right? The stuff on the floor. The radio in the back, the records here, the little mirror, this one, and of course also the eyes lighting up, that one is fake. But the chandelier, for example, and all the lights, that's real. I'm using a black diffusion filter on my camera, and that will give me a nice glow around all those highlights. So in essence, it looks pretty convincing for me, because we are using real elements to create depth, like the chandelier creates depth because that's how the light falls. So I don't change anything in lighting when I'm using artificial intelligence. And sometimes, VB is a good friend of us, we experimented a little bit with him while we were still in beta, and just to show you how much it progressed. So you saw the images before, and this is actually what we did for VB. The first time I experimented with it, the only thing I came up with was I tried everything. Egyptian signals, alien signals, it didn't work at all. We got some weird stuff. But then a few weeks later, it already started to go much more into the fantasy stuff that I really liked. So it wasn't photogenic yet, but it looked so incredibly amazing as a cartoon. And then the lighting effects came in, and nowadays you can get so much more with the same software. So, and this is in the time period, I think, of maybe 2 or 3 months, or maybe 2 or 3 weeks even. It went really fast with the Firefly. Okay, backgrounds. Now, of course, we are selling backdrops. We are the distributor for Click Backdrops in the Netherlands. And those backdrops are amazing, by the way. I want to give a little bit of attention to that. Because it's important, and every time when I take images, people ask me like, hey, what kind of backdrops do you use? Because what do you do in Photoshop? And I go like, I don't do anything in Photoshop with those backdrops. And they go like, yeah, sure, you take out a little bit of the glare. And this is the thing that I really want to point out. When we started with click backdrops in the Netherlands, there were a lot of photographers that looked at me like I was crazy. Like, why would I spend 499 euros for a Pro Fabric backdrop if I can buy one for 250 euros with just a print? And they all came back to us for the very simple reason. A lot of those prints that you buy online, if you clean them with water and soap, it will actually take the print off. If you clean our Pro Fabrics, they will stay nice, they will stay great. And this is when you do cake smashes. You don't want to lose your backdrop after 2 or 3 cake smashes. You want to do it for 10 or 20 years. So in the end, one of the most important things for me is, however, glare. I don't want glare on my backdrops. If I use a hard light source, I don't want that backdrop to reflect. And that's what I love about even the Final and the Pro Fabric from Click backdrops. They don't reflect. So that's actually why we started using those backdrops in the past. So one of my favorite backdrops in the studio is, however, not one of Click backdrops. It's actually Gray Seamless. Gray Seamless makes everything look better. It's the weirdest thing ever. If you have a Gray Seamless backdrop and you put a model on it and you have some nice light fall off, looks great. If you have Gray Seamless and you put color on it, looks great. If you use Gray Seamless like this and you let the light fall off, you get this beautiful dark to light. It's amazing. It really makes your model pop out. But at one point I just got so freaking bored with Gray Seamless. And I was hired to do the introduction for the Phase 1 in New York. And great camera, by the way. And of course 101 megapixels. And in the contract there was actually stated that I had to use a Gray Seamless backdrop. And I was just going like, I don't want to use a Gray Seamless backdrop. Why should I use a Gray Seamless backdrop? I'm in this beautiful studio in New York City. I want to shoot the studio, but in my contract was Gray Seamless. So I said, okay, do I have to do everything with Gray Seamless? No, you don't have to do everything with Gray Seamless, but just a few shots. I was going like, okay, is it your Gray Seamless? Yes. Okay, so after this it's gone. Yeah, we throw it out. And I said, okay, I want to use it, but I want to use it creatively. So we started doing this. Gave the model a little X-Acto knife and just made a little bit of a cut into the seamless and just made the model look true. At one point she got the fun out of it. So she got like, hey, why not like this, right? But of course you have this Phase 1 camera with you, so why not take the perfect selfie, right? Why not? It's the perfect selfie camera, 101 megapixels, why not? And then I imagined like, what if the model just aimed the camera towards me, some lighting from the back, some lens flare, like she's just bursting through the Gray Seamless, like the gray matter, everything is grayish, everything is boring, and then like a burst of light with a beautiful model, you have this 101 megapixel camera. They didn't use it a lot for advertising. I know a local dealer, I think, used it, but I thought it was an amazing opportunity to just show them like, hey, you can be really creative during a workshop. And I think that's one of the things that I love doing during the workshops, triggering people to think a little bit more outside the box. You can do a workshop with just lighting, and that's interesting, but you can also do workshops where you do way more, where you trigger people to think about like, hey, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What is the motivation? Instead of just shooting a beautiful girl instead of a beautiful backdrop. Just create something, think about it. And of course, seamless paper can be awesome, but I think for me seamless is always in the extremes and I get really fast bored with it. If I do seamless, the poses have to be amazing, like here with Nadine. It has to be something interesting. And as you can see here, the lighting setup is pretty simple. We're using a large umbrella, our fiber umbrella from Rogue actually. And the nice thing about the fiber is actually it has a nice sleeve. So it creates this beautiful soft light quality, much softer than you normally get from an umbrella. But it also has that nice focus light from an umbrella. The umbrella has something, and I think we all hate umbrellas, right? We don't like umbrellas because it's the light source we start out with. And we don't want to stay in the past. We want to continue. We want to have those beautiful, nice softboxes from 1,000 euros. We want to have those Fresnels from 1,500. I'm getting all excited. I want that strip light. But in the end, why don't we like the umbrella? And I think we don't like the umbrella is because we start with the umbrella. And the umbrella is a complicated light source. It's a light source that can be very broad. But when you feather it, you have a lot of power. But it's very, very hard to control because literally it goes everywhere. But think about this. If you have a shoot-through umbrella and you set it up for a white backdrop, you can actually light your backdrop, use it as an accent light on your model, and via the spill also light your bottom. In other words, the floor. So, not your bottom, of course, but the floor. Hey, my native tongue is not English, so sometimes I mess up. So the umbrella is actually incredibly versatile, and when Rogue released the fiberglass umbrella, that's the one that you can't break easily, they asked me to do a video about it, and of course it's our product, so yeah, sure, we do a video about it. And I literally started with the video, and I told Anouk, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, but hey, let's experiment. Every time we used it, I got more and more enthusiastic, and at this point it actually replaces a 1 meter softbox. So sometimes I use the 1 meter softbox with a grid to get a little bit more a nicer focus. But then when I don't use the grid, I actually use the umbrella, a much nicer solution. And in this case, we're also using 2 strip lights from the side with grids to make sure that we really aim it at our model. And we don't want double shadows on the floor. And this is something that a lot of people ask me when they do shots like this, like, hey Frank, we love to have that lighting from the back, light the accents, but we also have double shadows on the floor. How the heck do you get those away? First of all, sometimes I like them if they're really faint and they fade out. But if you don't want them, strip lights with grids, because a grid makes sure that it doesn't flat out over your floor. So if you take the grid out, the light will just spread out. If you use the grid, it will be focused. Now, if you don't have money for grids, do remember that every time you change the angle of the light, the shadows will also change. So this is why we never use lighting from the bottom aiming up, because it looks like Halloween. You don't want that. But with accent lighting, that's actually not that important. So if you don't have the money for a grid, you can place your strip lights from the side and just angle them up. So that way you don't get any light on the bottom. You still can't really light the feet of the model. It will be very tricky, but by just aiming them up, this is how I started with them, just aiming them up, and the shadows were gone. I didn't have to use white backdrops anymore. That was a whole change. Okay, is it true? It's true, I love fashion. Gray tone colors pop and whites look good. Yes, John, that's exactly why I love gray. And this is one of the tricks, I think. With gray, you can create gradients that are awesome. And if you contrast that with your colors, they really, really jump out, as you can see in those images. I've not heard of the fiber umbrella. I love using umbrellas. Okay, John, just check out the Rogue products. They have a fiberglass umbrella, and we actually broke one. Well, we didn't break the umbrella, we broke the shaft. And this was totally my mistake, by the way. I had one of the strobes up really high in our studio, and it just collapsed down. And I was just going like, okay, this is the end of the umbrella. And indeed, the shaft was broken. It took us half an hour to get the umbrella connected again, because the fiberglass, we just couldn't break it. At one point, I just put it on the floor and just put my foot on it, like with full power, to break them. So if you are frustrated like me with umbrellas breaking, try the Rogue products. Oh man, you will love those. Just to give you a little bit of an advertising boost, this is the brand. And of course you can buy it from us too. But in the UK, I believe, John, maybe you're from the UK or America, they have different, it's an American company, so they will have representation in your country. You're gonna love those products. They also have that magnetic system for your speed lights, which I use, and of course the flash bender, that's all Rogue. Okay, now backdrops. Now, one point in my career, I was asked by Sony to do a presentation on the SS Rotterdam. And this is a big boat, or ship, whatever you want to call it. And the thing that they asked me was like, hey, bring backdrops, because this isn't very nice. And it's just an empty room, and you're not going to like it, bring backdrops. I entered the room and I was just going like, why should I bring backdrops? This is amazing. And this is the thing for me, you know, with my backdrops, I can always shoot against my backdrops. But when I'm in a different location, I want to use that location. I want to do something different, because otherwise it's boring, you know. I can do the same thing at home. And I know a while ago in the Netherlands, there was this show where they took pictures of famous people on a location. And one of the locations was actually a big museum with all these nice paintings and wall stuff. It just looked amazing. And what did they do? They brought white seamless paper. You're kidding me. In a museum, use the backdrops. But I guess it was too difficult or something to light. I just can't wrap my head around it. When you see a backdrop like that, you're going to use that. And if you don't want to use those paintings and those nice tapestries, just put her against a nice backdrop with just wallpaper and like this really nice woodwork. Come on, why it's seamless? It's such a shame. So I use this backdrop, and let's be honest, it looks awesome, right? And we put a little chair in the corner, we put the lamp there, and we played the whole day long with just those curtains. Look at what you can do with just those nasty, ugly, not usable curtains that were there. I think a lot of people really need to have that switch turned. I can't use this. No, find stuff to do with it. Don't find stuff to not do with it. Find stuff to do with it. And this is in our studio. This is one of our old Masters backdrops from Click Backdrops. As you can see here, also here, I'm very carefully planning the shot. It's not like just place your model against the backdrop. We look at styling. The red hair really has to jump out at that backdrop. And when she moves, I want that back exactly in that location. Frank, can you do that in Photoshop? No, you can't. Of course you can shoot your model against gray seamless and then replace the backdrop, but look at this image. Everything is connected to each other. You can see the shadows, you can see the light fall off, you can see that the colors are correct, the angles are correct. You can see everything fitting together. When you replace a backdrop in Photoshop, it will always look a little bit off. Sometimes that's good enough, sometimes it isn't. And yeah, that's one of the things that I always tell people, real backdrops connect. And I always try to find the backdrops that are literally just connecting with me, but also with the model. So we have several setups in our studio. We have some with the classical masters. We have some with that very high contrast lighting or very colorful backdrops. And what we then do is we look at what the model is wearing the moment she comes on the set. And that's when I choose my backdrop. So in other words, we have, I believe, 3 on an electrical system, 3 on an electrical system on our stage, and then we have 2 finals and 2 clickies. So we have a lot of choice in our studio, and we have our studio walls and of course some seamless paper. But I have to be honest, since I'm using the Click backdrops, they just keep using me so many different ways. As you can see here, it just looks really nice in combination with. And by the way, this was an experiment for me. This was shot with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And in all honesty, I remember when I started with my smartphones, I bought them and it was a 0.5 megapixel. And I know the salesman told me like, sir, you're never going to use a camera again. And I was just going like, you know, my real camera has 8 megapixels. 8 megapixels. You know how much that is? 8 megapixels. It's huge. This is only 8 megapixels. Okay. You get my drift, right? So every time they promise, this is the death of the DSLR, this is the death of the mirrorless camera, nobody's going to use. And every camera up until now that I used, it just didn't come close to a normal camera. The first one that I actually used that was great was the Huawei, the P20 Pro. That was the first camera that really had like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. High resolution, really nice looking images, but a lot of, well, a little bit of noise, a lot of less dynamic range in certain situations. So it didn't really work. Then we got the Sony, of course, which has a great interface and great images. And now with the, I think with the Samsungs and the iPhones, especially with the iPhone 15 Pro Max that I'm using at the moment, for the first time I'm having a camera that really makes me go like, I don't want to have a point and shoot camera anymore. This is the first time. I'm not using a point and shoot camera anymore. When I'm go mountain biking or whatever, I'm just going to bring this camera. I'm not going to miss anything. I'm not going to do any, how do you do, concessions. Of course, it's not a Sony 7R5 or whatever, but it is a really good replacement for a point and shoot. And as you can see here, there is a certain, and I don't know how to call it, but a certain liveness in the images. It's a little bit more three-dimensional. And in the past, they were really flat. The resolution was never a problem. It was the images looked flat. And nowadays, they look a little bit more round. I hope you guys know what I mean. Oh, John says, London here, yes, I have a lot of Rogue gear. Yeah, Rogue rocks. I've been with them for over 15 years, I think. And we've been now their distributor for only 2 years. So a lot of people go like, hey, you promote Rogue because you sell it, right? No, we've been promoting Rogue for 13 years before we sold it. So really great brand. Hey, and there we have George Monaghan. Hey, he just became a member. Oh, I didn't tell you guys about that. That's really nice. YouTube opened up a lot of extra options for us. You can, for example, now donate money if you think like, hey, this was a great answer. But we don't ask for it, so don't unless you really want to. I'm not here for the commercial stuff. I'm just here because I love teaching you guys. And we now have something new, and that's called YouTube subscribers. Now, we have a video about it. I'm going to show you that later. But the main advantage of YouTube subscribers is that we can show videos earlier for you guys. So we have a lot of in the queue, of course. And for subscribers, you just open up everything. So you can just watch it straight away. And we have just uploaded a full-length lighting tutorial, also only for the subscribers, 45 plus minutes with lighting tutorials. And every month I'm doing retouch videos for the subscribers, so you can get a lot of information about how do you light your images. And I'm always trying to mimic your workflow. So if you tell me, hey, I only edit on an iPad, you send your images in, I will edit those images on the iPad and tell you how to do it. If you use Boris FX, I will do the same thing, but I will use Boris FX. So George, thank you so very much for joining our subscribers group. Send in your images for retouch, of course, if you're under that tier, and welcome and enjoy your video. Okay, let's go for the next one. Same here, I try to mimic my backdrop with the styling of the model. And this is also one of those old masters. I think in your studio, what I would do is one or two of those old masters and one very extreme one. So an extreme one, I mean something like this. Now, when I saw this one in the flyer or in the brochure, I'm never going to use that one. That's way too busy. And then Charlie from Click Backdrops actually told me, like, you know what, try it. You're going to love it. And I did. But look at the difference between the backdrops. This one is so busy, and then compare it to this, very quiet. The reason I'm showing this, however, is another thing. We talked about styling and getting everything together. Do you see that when we're shooting against a backdrop like this, everything just melts together? You almost don't see a model. And when you look at it, of course, the model is there, but it becomes part of the backdrop. And I think that's the big appeal for a backdrop like this. But if you don't want that, try contrasting colors, like for example here, that blue in the back and that yellow in the front. Do remember that we are very focused on emotional colors. So green isn't a real emotional color, but red and blue are. And yellow, of course, is very much connected to that blue. Same as magenta, and that's between blue and red. And yellow, of course, is between between red and green. And cyan is, of course, between blue and green. So those colors can contrast really nice. And what I find is if you use a secondary color, so cyan, magenta, yellow, and a primary color, red, green, and blue, and green not so much, and you combine those two, sometimes you get a really nice combination. So in this case, blue with yellow really pops. And when I use gels, by the way, I mostly use, by the way, a red and a blue. Okay, because green doesn't really pull any emotion for me. Ineke and Fred, welcome on board. Great platform, Learning with Frank. Yes, we try to keep it Learning with Frank, and sometimes also with Anna Week. Now, of course, you can build small sets. This is one of the things that I love to do during workshops. We just go to flea markets and we just buy stuff. We recently bought big Chinese, how do you call it, wires, fence, whatever. You're going to see them very soon in one of our workshops and videos. But the building sets can be expensive or very cheap. And one of the things that is easy to do is, of course, get some material. Like, for example, on a discounter store for clothing material, cloth. I hope I pronounced it correct. Satin. It really reflects the light back. It gives you that nice sparkle, and you can just lay your model on it and just use a very hard light. Now, don't light something like this with a huge softbox, because the result won't be there. It will be dull. You will go into, you go like, I don't know what Frank does, but it looks really dull. Now, if you use a harder light source, like for example a snoot is perfect, or a Fresnel even better, or just an open reflector with a grid, you will get those nice sparking colors. The colors will just jump out to you, and it just looks awesome, let's be honest. And especially when you use, for example, a ladder, a staircase in this case, and just aiming your camera down. You don't need Photoshop for something like this. The only thing that you might adjust a little bit is like the vignette. Make it a little bit tighter in Photoshop. Why not? Add a little bit of blue into the shadows. You get a totally different look. Now in this case we're using two, and now I'm really stuck with the names, Plinten, Lambrisering. That's Dutch. You use them on the walls or on the floors. We actually bought them because we have movable walls in our studio and they don't connect to the floor. There's this gaping hole. And we actually bought those to put them on the floor, and that looks nice, like in a normal old-fashioned building, like those vintage buildings. And in this case, I just placed them against the wall in a triangle, and somebody asked me like, hey, what are leading lines? Can you make them in a photo with a model? And I was just going like, yeah, why not just place those two against the wall? And if you do it like this, it doesn't really look nice. I like the shot, but the leading lines, right? But if you shoot it like this, now it fits all in that leading line. So in essence, both shots are great for me. But changing it just a little bit, you can create something that's a little bit more following the rules or a little bit out of the box. And when I look at it, I like them both. But sometimes people find this one a little bit more easier to look with because of the lines. So think about that when you're shooting your images, of course. Now, backdrops can be so incredibly easy, but sets can be easy too. Like, for example, here, Nadine is, of course, a master with this kind of stuff. This is just paper, I believe. This is just a Christmas wrapping paper and some old curtains we found on the attic. I believe they're actually from Nadine. The fireplace in the back isn't really a fireplace. It's something we bought on a flea market for, I believe, 10 euros. And everything else is just props. Same here, if you don't have the fireplace and you don't have money for the fireplace, you just use your old curtains that you find in the attic and some Christmas wrapping paper. And of course you have to be creative like Nadine. Building a set can also be just the floor in your studio or with a backdrop in the back. We call them skirling boards. Yes, George, that's actually, I heard that term before. And in this case, we are using just an old chair. And I think chairs are always interesting. Get as many chairs as you can, because you can pose your model on a chair. You can use this as a prop. You can just place it in a set and let your model stand on it. Chairs can be incredibly interesting, especially if you have nice chairs. Now, if you don't have nice chairs, that's even more interesting, because those chairs you can destroy. You can take the coatings out. You can just make them destroy them on the floor. Everything just think about it. There's so many options. In this case, we're using a chair, we're using a little lamp, and we're using a flower pot with some branches with lighting in it. And we use those actually a lot, but always in different locations, different settings. And of course also our dog comes in, our Chewy. We have to put Chewy in the presentation, of course. Sets can also be built up with even easier stuff, like for example chandeliers. Everything else is lighting. We had the cape from, I think a few years back, from, I was doing a photo walk, I think, and we saw this party store, and they had this Dracula costume, and we just bought the cape, and we bought it for the cape actually. It just looks so great on a model because the coating is red, but it's not normal red. It's that really vibrant red. As you can see here, two chandeliers on the top, and of course our backdrop. Now, this is not the image that I liked. I liked it, but I thought it was a little bit too subdued, a little bit too dark. And of course with a vampire, you like dark, right? But what is the color that really jumps out with a vampire? Red. So we decided, you know what, we have a vinyl backdrop, and vinyl really reflects great with colors. And so I just decided it's a blue backdrop, but what if I just place a red spot straight on that backdrop? Just like normally it would glare like crazy, just change the angle just a little bit and the glare was 100% gone. And you get this really nice blend with that blue from the backdrop and that red light. And the nice thing about those backdrops is the structure of the backdrop literally prevents that glare, but also makes sure that those colors really are vibrant. So you're not taking away the blue, but you're really adding the red. And this sounds weird, but if you ever worked with vinyl backdrops, you know exactly what I mean. On some backdrops, you are not adding color, you are taking color away. So if a blue backdrop, you put a red strobe on it, all the blue will be gone, it will be dirty blue and everything will be red. With these backdrops, I don't know exactly how it works, but the blue just stays there and the red just mixes with those colors. And that's for me one of the reasons I'm using them, because I can use them over and over again. Different colors, different angles, and just create something new every time. Okay, add a little bit of smoke and that's the final shot. So we started out with just a little bit of smoke and that blue, and that was okay. Here the red I really liked, but maybe a little bit too strong. And then in the end we ended up with this one. And of course a little bit of posing. You can also be inspired by old movies, like for example Blow Up. Why not? And in this case, you already have everything. You have your studio, you have your model, you just need a male model to hold the camera, and you're off. And later on we recreated this shot for the Calby 1 video, by the way. And this is, I believe, the one from the video. I have a little bit more, and I just loved including the Fresnel here in the stand. In the original one I didn't do that. This is also an interesting. We have two wooden floor parts that we actually placed straight up. So now we have two wooden walls, and we can connect them together like in a V shape, or we can leave them a little bit open on the back. And this is actually what I'm doing here. So here it's open in the back, but because there's no lighting yet, you don't see that. So we have two of those walls standing like this. The only light source I'm using here, this was a challenge from one of our students. Like, what can you do with a light bulb? So we did a part of the workshop just with light bulbs, and it was amazing. A lot of people were going like, why light bulbs? I said, just bear with me, it's going to be fun. So we started with the light bulb here. This is the only light source. But what about if we are using the modeling lights of our strip light that was placed behind our model? Now you can see that it looks a little bit more like a horror movie, you know, where you're walking through a dark corridor, and when you don't see the back, it's not that scary. But when you see in the back a little bit of light and you can't make out what's there, that's way more scarier. And of course, then when you do use the strobe, here you go. Now the fun thing about this one is if you have a remote control, you can of course turn on your modeling light, and of course make sure that you don't use your strobes. So by standing in the same location, you can shoot it with the light bulb, turn on your modeling light, take a strobe shot, and you deliver 3 totally different images to your client. And this is the most important thing. Always surprise your client with more than they bargained for. Same backdrops, only in this case we use wallpaper on it, and we just build a set. Now we have them in total V shape, and in this case we didn't use the, let me find out how it's called them, skirting board. Thank you. So we didn't use the skirting boards here. In this case we still did it with Photoshop. Here we open them up again in the backdrop using a strip light to get some light through, and of course our chandeliers. And you see the same sticks again with those lights, only a different flower ball in this case, and the same chair. So you can use things over and over again. And by using smoke, of course, in a set, you can create it a little bit more interesting. And there we have Rolf. Hello Rolf, welcome in our live chat. Feel free to ask any questions. It is in English, however, sorry for that. But hey, it is in English. Here we go. If the light doesn't work really well, that doesn't matter anyway. This is how I got this idea, because I was shooting it like this, and at one point my front strobe didn't fire. And I was just going like, that looks absolutely amazing, but we don't want to do it with the same dress. So do you have something darker? And at that time we still had dresses from, we were shooting a campaign for, I believe, Gothic dresses, and we still had some of those dresses there. So they quickly changed into that dress, and we shot exactly the same shot, but then without that front strobe. So sometimes it's also important to, yeah, it doesn't look right. Sometimes you go like, wow, this is amazing. Okay, same here, very simple. Just we used our studio step up to get onto the stage. That's actually mimicking now as a table. We have some really great playing cards, large playing cards. We had a large cup and saucer, and of course our sofa. And of course Nadine with her amazing styling again. And it doesn't cost a lot. That's what this is about. These sets are all below 50 euros, but probably even below 25 euros. Sometimes even below 10, because we use stuff that is already there. Same here with the chandeliers. Shoot through the chandeliers. You can create that really nice out of focus material. Use plastic material in your backdrop. And this one, by the way, I do have to give you one advice. This was shot during our open house a few years ago. And we set everything up, and I really liked how it looked. And then we said, you know what, we're going to have lunch, and we're going to come back in a few minutes, and then we're going to start our open house. And everybody can just come in. Now, luckily, nobody came in, but after 10 minutes, we walked back into the studio. And we're going, oh, this isn't right. It smells really bad. And then we found out, and this is one of the tips I will give you guys, plastic and hot modeling lights don't go well together if they're really close to each other. So luckily we didn't have any fires, and we just opened up everything and it was okay, but ooh, be careful for that. Wedding dresses and Christmas lighting, and just very, very weak lighting. And the thing that we do here is actually mix flashes with available light. And it isn't that hard to do. If you want me to do a video about it, just let me know in the next digital classroom or whatever, we're going to talk about it. The thing is, you have to remember a little trick. Your shutter speed is for the ambient light. Your aperture is for your strobe. So if you shoot something like this, I will always use my main light as low as possible. 2.8 ISO 400, perfect. And then I only use my shutter speed to let in the ambient light. Now, a lot of people ask me like, hey, what kind of strobe should I buy? Should I buy 1000 watts? Should I buy 2000 watts? Should I buy... No. For studio work, believe it or not, 100 watts to 400 watts is ideal. You don't need more. For the very simple reason, you can get a 400 watt strobe, but you can never ever shoot that on 2.8 ISO 400. Or maybe if you have a really good one like Hensel, Profoto or Elingrom, you can literally just lower those down for example, 6 or 7 stops. But normally with a 1000 watt, you can't go low enough. If you have a 100 watt, it's more than enough to shoot in the studio because you can still shoot f16 on ISO 400. And with modern cameras, ISO 400 is no problem at all. But with those strobes, you can go very, very low. And that means that you can mix it with ambient light. Now, if you go like, oh, Frank, I all bought 1000 watt strobes. Can't I do it now? Yes, of course you can do it. Use neutral density filters, but don't use them on your camera, of course. Use them on your strobes. So just use neutral density filters on your strobe and just take that power down. And then you can do the same thing, of course, with 1000 watt strobes. Just a little bit more work. But as you can see here, combining ambient light or continuous lighting with strobes can give you perfect images. And of course, adding just a little bit of that extra styling. And again, we're working with Nadine and that just helps a lot. And here we are actually, over here, I am actually opening up the shutter just a little bit more to let in even more of that ambient light. Now, I think this is one of the most spectacular backdrops I ever used, and it's the cheapest one ever. I think the whole backdrop was under 10 euros. These are rescue blankets. And those rescue blankets are gold, but when you turn them around, they're silver. Now, when you take them out of the packaging carefully, you will see that they're all squares, or a rectangular actually. It looks a little bit like bricks, so you can build a wall from it. Now, I didn't want everything as a wall. I wanted something like, it looked like it was a wall, and then the gold just dripped down into the bottom. And I just going like, I just love that effect. So I actually just squeezed them together and created a little bit of a wrinkle effect. The only thing was the floor didn't reflect, of course, because we did have the gold on the floor, but it just didn't do the trick. So on the floor we have plexiglass that really reflects the light back up and really gives that color. And then we just experimented with lighting, creating different lighting effects on the backdrop or no light at all. Getting one of my favorite props, the guitar, of course. Yeah, no, there's no head on the guitar. Okay, and the next part is smoke. Let's talk about that a little bit later, because I have to get a little bit of a drink, and let's start a commercial of my friends from BenQ. And this is without a doubt one of my favorite monitors, by the way. I'm still using it myself too. Okay, now if you think, hey, those BenQ monitors are really interesting, and they are, we have only for the European customers a 10% discount code. So email me. We're not going to give the code online because we only have a limited amount of those codes, but email me and we will give you a code for a 10% discount in the European stores. And those monitors, literally, I've been using them for, I think, over 9 years now, I think, or even 10, and they're absolutely amazing. Very color accurate. The anti-glare on the new screens is stunning, and the color accuracy is just amazing. And of course the new ones, the 272, I recently did a review on it. You can now just use one cable to connect the monitor to your laptop, and the laptop will be charged and everything else is connected to the monitor. It just works like a charm. Okay, we have a question from Ineke and Fred. If I'm metering the ambient light at f3.2 at 1/25th and ISO 800, should I use 3.2 for my studio lights and play later with the shutter speed? Yes. So what you're doing is you're setting your strobes as low as possible. And now you're metering, and you of course want to get the lowest of your lens. So let's say 2.8 or 3.2 or 4, depending on what lens you have. Let's say you're shooting with a 2.8 lens. You want to get that light as close as possible to 2.8, but on the lowest setting. So you place it the furthest away that you get. You use the light modifier that eats the most light, like for example a strip light with a grid. You place that on the position where you want it. Don't do any sacrifices for that. Just place it where you want. Now just meter the light on the lowest possible setting, and you will get, for example, ISO 800 2.8. That's perfect. And now the only thing you have to do for your ambient light or your continuous lighting is use your shutter speed. And the lower the shutter speed goes, the more that ambient light will glow. The less the shutter speed, the more that ambient light will be killed. Ambient light is cumulative. There we go again. It adds up over time, while a strobe is a pulse, and that will just go like boom, and that's it. Yeah. Okay. Smoke is always interesting. If you have something that isn't that interesting, use smoke and everything will just be more interesting. At least that's my opinion. Like as you can see here, we just built the whole set, and without the smoke it just didn't look right. So we decided, you know what, let's throw in some smoke and let's create something a little bit more interesting. Now, in all honesty, don't use snakes. We've done a few shots with snakes, actually, I believe 2 or 3. And all those shoots were done with professional animal trainers. So I highly recommend you guys look at this. He's actually having the snake around her neck. Trust me, if you do this with somebody that just says, yeah, I have snakes at home, I know my snakes. No, as soon as they start to strangle, all bets are off. They did it on my arm, and I was just going like, I'm a really, really strong guy, but if that snake starts to strangle her neck, just call an ambulance and you're done. So don't do this without any proper care, because they know exactly what temperature to keep those snakes. They know exactly how to handle the snakes, and of course also what to do with those snakes, because they are really unpredictable. But with a professional animal handler, those shots are amazing, let's be honest. I just love them. Same backdrop again, but now with a little bit of smoke. And again, if the strobe doesn't fire in the back, it can actually create a really nice, interesting shot. So don't always shoot with all strobes connected. Same here, smoke, always light smoke from the back. You can overdo it with smoke and really create a nice milky effect. Like you can see here, almost like a painting from the old days with a little bit of fainted colors. I just love that stuff. Or you can just do it as a haze in your studio by using more focused light sources and just creating those streaks of smoke. Or you can just use it very scarcely. Like in this case, we wanted that ball to emit those lights, those reflections. But whatever you did, I couldn't get it right. So what we used, actually, we didn't want to use smoke here, but we had to. So in this case, everything in the front doesn't have any smoke, but we have one snoot actually from the top aimed down at that disco ball, and then just lose a puff of smoke just to get the smoke up. And now when you aim at the disco ball, you see all those light beams going out into the smoke. And you see it smoke, but hey, it looks pretty awesome in my opinion. And sometimes even on location, just use smoke to pump the whole area full with smoke. Create something interesting. Props, of course, props. Yes, you can't do a photo shoot without props, right? You have to have something in your hands or on your face or whatever. This was one of my first model shots ever. In all honesty, this is also the moment where I found out the difference between gaffer's tape and duct tape. Let me tell you, the model also found out. I didn't know the difference. I only knew that we needed something to get that cup and saucer right. And then somebody told me like, hey, you need gaffer's tape for that. And I was going like, gaffer's tape, will that help? Yeah, that will help. And he showed me a picture of this roll of tape. But because we're on the time stress, I told Anouk like, hey, can you very quickly go to the market and just get this? She just looked at it, she's sure. So she came back and we had this beautiful tape, but when I opened it up, and I was going like, ooh, that's really strong. Are you sure? She said, yeah, it looks the same. Okay. So we in the Netherlands, or especially in our studio, if we do something, we do it right. So we don't do half work. If something has to stay, it has to stay. So we put a lot of gaffer's tape over there, took the shots were amazing. At that point, I thought they were amazing. And then we had to take it off. And yeah, that didn't went well. So in other words, the difference between gaffer tape and duct tape is that gaffer tape will get very easily out of the hairs and whatever of the model. Duct tape is actually made to stick. So don't use that stuff. Newspapers can be great props. Somebody actually did this image a while ago and he emailed me like, hey Frank, how do you like my image? And I said, yeah, I really like it, but... And I didn't say anything else. And he just emailed me back. I said, you didn't like me copying your image? I said, it's the biggest term of flattery, right? If you copy somebody's images. So yeah, no problem. I said, the only thing is, look at the front of the newspaper. They're the obituaries. So in all honesty, if I would have shot it, I would have taken a little bit better care of what's in the news. That was hilarious according to him. And he shot it again. And that looked a lot better. Same here, just a little bit of a thing in her neck. You can buy those on flea markets or vintage stores. I don't even know how we got this, probably from Nadine. She has a vintage store and she brings all these really cool stuff. And before I knew Nadine, I actually did all the styling myself, like with toilet paper. Why not? We are on very low budget, remember this, right? This was in the first months of me photographing models. So toilet paper was about everything I could afford at that moment. Or blow-up lips. Or a blue backdrop and a megaphone. Megaphones are awesome because you can use them for advertising. So they could be great stock photography until AI, of course, came on the market. You can also use a palette. At that point, we had a computer company and we used a lot of palettes for monitors and drives and computers, of course. Placed the model behind it and it just didn't look right. But I love horror movies. And I was going like, what if you scream behind it? Like, you know, people that are... this sounds a little bit weird, but I'm really a normal teddy bear kind of guy. I won't hurt a fly. But you know those movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where those girls are locked up in a cellar in an American house, where they try to get up and they push and you see the wood going. And of course, normally those would be closed, right? Because otherwise the cellar would probably flood. But in those movies, of course, they're open because you want to see the actor screaming. And I was just going like, let's try something like that. And in all honesty, it looked fake. It didn't look right because she was hiding behind the pallet and it was too small. So just place your foot on the pallet and just destroyed one of those little connecting wood strips. She was behind it and now look at the image. It screams. It has so much power. And this was way before I started experimenting with expressions or styling. This was just having fun in our studio. I literally just had my first camera. I had one of our friends, Corinne in this case, and she came over like every week to just test out stuff. So we did the weirdest stuff with palettes, with lighting from the back. That's actually how we started with backlighting, testing out backdrops. So when you start out with photography, I think one of the important things is to find a model or somebody else that is very, very patient and they don't run away if you're experimenting with light. And if they do and you can't find anybody, find a mannequin, a little doll that you can just dress up in your studio, especially with hairs, because those are the hairs that are a little bit more fibery. So when you have backlighting, they will really just shine up. If you can get those lights to those hairs to look soft, you can, without any doubt, light a normal model's hair. And this is one of the things that I found the most hardest when I started with photography, is making sure that those hairs didn't show up too much, too white or too blown out or too sharp. It's because we were always using too harsh of a light source on the hairs. A little bit of a softbox, soft lighting on the hairs worked so much better. And that's the stuff that you learn when you work with somebody that doesn't run away or if you use a mannequin. Same here, just a little bit of a prop, clothing from online party store, in this case of course Harley Quinn, and a big hammer. And you can have so much fun with it. Or an old vacuum cleaner and a good friend of us. Or what about your backdrop paper that you can't use anymore? And again, see the combination, red, yellow, blue. We talked about it before. And of course you can borrow something, like for example this, again I don't know the name of it. But we just borrowed it, put it on the stage, and it just gives you something to shoot, you know, without costing anything. Tractor tires, of course we are in a rural area, so we have a lot of those. Yeah, we can borrow those, that's not a real problem over here. In a city that will be a little bit more of a problem, getting them into your studio even. A box, I got it from Mark, a student of mine and friend. And we just experimented with the box. I'm still having to find some stuff to do with it. During this workshop, the idea was actually not the box, but to create something a little bit futuristic. Like, how would it be in the future if you were just flying in a box? And then, you know what, we have to have some lighting from the back. What happens if you use a snoot from Rogue, but you don't use the deflector material inside and create something a little bit more like the V-shapes or the Warner Bros. Whatever was going on in my mind, I don't remember. But the idea was to get something a little bit more vaporing out of that backdrop in lighting. And of course, the idea behind a setup like this is that if you are shooting a model and you want something interesting on your backdrop, you remember how we shot this during a workshop. So sometimes the images of the workshop don't look 100% perfect or 100% spectacular, but the techniques in those images you can use, of course, in your own images and create something really spectacular. Like in this case, for example, why not use a different angle? Again, use a high standpoint and then just aim down with a wide angle. But props can also be cameras, like for example an old camera. You can buy them on flea markets for almost nothing. Or a Polaroid. You can have some fun with those. And of course you can also go to a shop and just tell them like, hey, for a photo shoot I want some cameras, can I please borrow a few? In my case they said yes. I don't know if they will do it for you too, but if you bring them back next time they will probably lend you a few more if they are allowed to use your images. That's always what I do. If I lend something and it's in good trust of course and it all goes well, they will always get the images and I will always tell them like, hey, you can use the images without any doubt, just use them for promotional use or whatever. But next time, can I come back? And most of the time they will say yes. So cameras are great, of course, as props because we all know how to use them and we all know how to hold them. But also old microphones, and this one isn't an old microphone, but it's a very famous microphone. It's the Elvis microphone, right? Or James Hetfield microphone. And in this case we bought it on AliExpress for I think 20 euros and it actually sounds okay. But when you give it to your model, look at the difference that makes. Think about those images without the microphone. Doesn't look right, right? That microphone really changes everything. Change the lighting and just play around with everything in your bag. But the microphone for me really makes those shots. And here we use it with another model. Same prop. Also a little toy gun. And of course in Photoshop you can change it, but in this case we didn't even. Now I love playing guitar and I also love collecting guitars. And sometimes I just bring a few of those guitars to our studio and just combine them with, for example, a little amp. I love the block backdrop. This one looks a little bit busy, and at one point I just looked at it and go, I don't know, it just doesn't look right in the shots. And then I found out if you don't light it too much, but just a little bit, that backdrop just really shines as a more subdued backdrop, if you know what I mean. Some backdrops really come to life when you put a light on it. Some backdrops are better if you just leave them very more in the backdrop, like a silent backdrop. And this way it really works for me with the block. So as you can see here, just using your own guitars or props. And if you are collecting toy trains, why not use a toy train and just let your model hold it in, for example, an outfit of a conductor. A dinghy in the studio, and by creating lighting, I just thought like, how can we mimic that it's on the sea? Blue, right? If we see blue, we immediately believe it's on the sea. If I would have used the red here, people would go like, yeah, dinghy in the studio with red, what? Could be a boat in the back, right? With the red light, but we don't think like that. Somehow our mind doesn't think like that. Our mind sees blue, oh, they're in the ocean, right? And I don't know why, but I just loved working with that kind of stuff. This was shot during an Ultimate weekend, by the way, and we had the dinghy, and I didn't know what to do with it. They didn't told me they had it, and they just threw it in the studio like, okay, Frank, think of something to do with this one. And I was kind of like, whoa. And I think this is the thing that you have to train yourself for. Whenever you see a product, think about stuff that you can do with it and not what you can't do with it. Like, for example, this is the remote control for our lighting in the studio or in this area. And of course you can go like, I can't do anything with this, right? It's a simple remote control. But what about if you don't see it as a remote control, but you hold it like this and you let your model hold it like this, and you take a few shots of your model in all different dance moves or strange moves, and you just place your model on here in Photoshop and just make it look like that, like she's doing Twister on the remote control. You can also, of course, zap somebody with a remote control, make a big beam come out of it and just light everything up, or big explosions. You can make somebody actually throw this towards the screen. There's so many things you can do with just a simple remote control. Now, it sounds weird, like why should I think about stuff with a remote control? You are training your mind to see options during a photo shoot. Give somebody a gun, you know what to do, right? But give somebody something that isn't that obvious, and you have to think creatively. And this will save you sometimes when you're on a location and you have to solve something that's completely different. You don't use any props, but you have to solve a backdrop. By having that creative process in your mind, you will immediately go like, oh, the backdrop doesn't work. Okay, let's change something. Oh, take that office chair, take that, and place it here. Oh, now we have the logo of the business in the back. Okay, we have to overlight this a little bit because there's too much light outside, so we have to kill the aim. You see how everything comes together, and that's all because you're training your mind in problem solving, literally. Okay. Same here, gun straight into the camera for some effect. And I know a lot of people hate guns, me too, but for photo shoots, they're just awesome, right? And of course, again, using that wide angle. And if you don't have any props, why not just use some hair lacquer? Or use your own lighting, but don't use your ring light just to light your model. Use your ring light around your model. Why not? That's the name, right? A ring light. Or a disco ball. That one was very, very tricky to pull off, by the way, and I'm still not happy with the shot, but hey, you have to do it, right? Okay, colors. Color evokes emotion. Let's be totally honest, colors are the most important thing. That evokes our emotion, and colors are really, really strong. For example, if I call out red, you immediately go like, hey, love, hate, power, warmth, coziness, friendliness, Christmas. Not really a feeling, but hey, you get all warm and tingly from Christmas, right? When I call out blue, distant, cold, enemy, hostile, loneliness, sad, somber. But when I call green, safe, nauseous, maybe, I don't know. So colors evoke emotion. This is why our fire trucks are red, not because it's a color that gets your attention. No, then they should be green because green is our most sensitive color. No, they make them red because it's an emotional color. Fire, danger, right? So the best trick I can give you guys is 2 examples. If you are 3 miles below sea level in a concrete bunker without any windows and you turn on a light bulb, what's the color of that light? It's the normal color, right? It isn't blue. So why in the Abyss from James Cameron all the lighting at that depth were blue? Because they want to give you the intention. They're underwater, it's blue. Doesn't make any sense at all. All the lighting in that bottom part should be the same color as above, but then it doesn't look right. Look about Titanic. It's a little bit brownish, and why? To mimic that era. It doesn't make any sense. The movie was shot now. But the most important thing to remember is, did you ever walk over a graveyard at night? And did you see blue light and a little bit of mist over the floor? If you do, and you hear violins, run away very, very fast because you're in a movie. That mist doesn't appear at night, it appears in the morning, right? The blue light doesn't appear at night or during any time of the day because the moon is yellow. So it doesn't make any sense at all. All those things are to create emotion, and we are so wired that we recognize those emotions. So when we start using colors, you can literally see that images can pop off the screen. or the lack of color, or the twisting color, where we just change certain color channels to create something a little bit more fashiony like, a little bit more porcelain. It looks a little bit more, I don't know how to call it. It's not undersaturated. It's actually hypersaturated, but it's more on the toned down side. Literally what you see here. Normally the blues will really jump out and the reds will jump out. But by lowering the blue channel, the red just pops out way more. And then changing the color temperature just slightly, you balance those two off. If you are interested in that, just leave a comment and I will do a video on those in one of the next episodes. Because we are actually planning for December to do 1 or 2 extra digital classrooms aimed at retouching. And I'm immediately saying to you guys, if you have any images that you want me to retouch, send them to me today, tomorrow or next week. And I will incorporate those into that digital classroom. That doesn't go for the subscribers and for the Patreons. Those images will be behind the subscriber button. But if you are a regular viewer, and we appreciate you just as much, of course, just send in your images, 2 per person max, and I will select those images and I will do a proper retouch on those. So, okay, same here. As you can see here I didn't change that color channel. Do you see the difference? It's such a huge difference how you can manipulate those colors, but also do you see the difference in emotion in those shots? Totally different look, and that's all with colors. This is also how we can choose backdrops very, very wisely to change the colors constantly. So if I choose a backdrop, I will always see like, hey, how does it reflect to the light? Because I want to use those backdrops over and over again. So in this case, when you look at this, I can add a little bit of magenta, for example, to the shadows and create something like this totally different look. Or a little bit of red or blue. And as you can see here, the backdrop responds very nicely. Same here with our blue backdrop using red light from the side. Or just start out with this. Nice poses, and then add some blue from the back. Do you see how much impact that has on your shot? It's nice. There we go. This comes much more alive for me. And then just tone that blue down a little bit, as you can see here. Same with the clicky. Blue backdrop with a lot of lines. Add a little bit of blue in the colors and look at the difference. So this is without, and this is with just a little bit of blue coming from the side, creating a little bit of lens flare. And for me, that just creates a whole new atmosphere in your shot, and you don't have to use smoke. That lens flare just takes away a little bit of that hardness in your lighting. Same here. This is a backdrop called Theater Door, I believe. It's totally black with white, and at first I thought like, I don't know if that's going to be interesting, and it turned out to be one of my favorite walls. Same reason, because it's black and white, you can add a lot of colors. So when you choose your backdrops, always think about this. Black and white and gray or neutral tones respond very well to colors. But also your secondary and primary colors. A red backdrop or a blue backdrop is a little bit harder to photograph with gels than, for example, a more toned down backdrop like magenta, cyan, or for example yellow. I'm not going to say that you have to buy a yellow backdrop, but look at those tones, those combinations in your backdrop. I hope that makes sense. Take away all the color, you get black and white, or add blue in the shadows, but block off your model's face and use normal lighting on your model's face. This is a technique I call light in light. And it actually means that I'm using one light to light my subject's face or body, depending on what I want in that shot. And then one extra strobe under the same angle with a gel or without a gel to open up the shadows. And that creates some beautiful images, especially when you combine it like here with flags to really block off light to somebody's face. This is without blue light. This is with. It's of course very personal if you like it or not, but personally I think it gives a little bit more extra oomph. You can do the same thing outside by lighting the backdrop, or in this case we're using fluorescent strobes, and those are literally unique. I never did that after that, so we did it once and look at that. I would love to do that again, but we don't have any fluorescent strobes anymore. The paint was the biggest problem to get, by the way. Okay, I have to get something to drink, so I'm going to show you very quickly what we set up for our YouTube subscribers. So watch this video, and I hope you subscribe during our broadcast. Hey guys, my name is Frank Dorhoff and you already completed step 1. You found our YouTube channel. Now, if you look at our YouTube channel, you see that we do a lot of different stuff. We do gear reviews, we do live streams, lighting tutorials, we talk about street or product photography, but mostly it's of course aimed at model photography. And within that, there are so many options. Like for example, what is your perfect workflow? How do we teach our workshops? How do we light our model? Well, you can find everything on our YouTube channel. Now, there is one more option that I want to share with you guys, and this one is really exciting. YouTube opened up the subscribers option, and this gives us so much more options. If you join our subscribers section, the first thing you will find out is that we uploaded a full-length tutorial, more than 45 minutes, talking about gear, lighting your model, choosing your right backdrops, how do we shoot tethered, how do I create my whole workflow, how do I coach my model, why do you walk around your model to create contrast. It's a jam-packed episode and you will absolutely gonna love that. But also on the subscribers section you will find behind the scenes photos, behind the scenes videos, and of course special dedicated live streams for the questions that you guys ask me. But there's even more. Every month we're gonna do reviews for your images. And the fun part about this is it's not just opening that image and showing you, hey, I would have done it this way. No, we're gonna go much further. I wanna have the raw files and I wanna have the original files that you retouched. I'm gonna do a full dedicated retouch aimed at your workflow. So if you edit on the iPad, I'm gonna edit your image on the iPad. If you edit in Photoshop with plugins, I'm gonna try my best to create exactly the same workflow that you have in your studio or at home. So you can recreate those retouches without any problem, because in my opinion, it doesn't make any sense to show you very fancy plugins or very fancy techniques that you can't do yourself. And that's the idea of our whole channel and the subscribers section. We want to make it possible that you at home or in your studio can create professional looking images by understanding lighting, by knowing how everything works, by knowing how colors interact, how your workflow is set up easily. So join us on our YouTube channel, and of course we love it if you would join our subscribers section. It's open now and it starts at $2.99 a month. You're gonna get a lot of information for that. So join our YouTube channel and the subscribers section. Stay creative, keep shooting, and see you online. Bye guys. Okay guys, so I hope you enjoyed that. Let me switch over to this, by the way, because I do have to give you some messages, of course. That's part of course, what we do. Now, you heard me talking about that we have our sponsors for our digital classroom, and some of those sponsors have been with us for 10 years now. And one of them is actually BenQ. Now, when you are looking for a monitor, the things that I found interesting about BenQ is actually they're hardware calibratable, so you have the best possible representation of your colors because you are actually calibrating inside the monitor instead of just using software. And they just recently rewrote Palette Master, and that's why I actually want to tell you guys this in the video. Palette Master is their software to calibrate, and the nice thing about the new Palette Master is it's a lot faster and it's easier to control. So if you had BenQ in the past and you didn't like Palette Master that much, and Palette Master, the old version, is okay, the newer one is just awesome. And it's also compatible with your older monitor in some cases. So make sure you check out the BenQ website if Palette Master also works for your monitor. And again, if you want a BenQ monitor and you're in the European Union, just give me an email and we'll get you 10% discount. The other brand we're using a lot, and this is also our own brand, is Rogue. A lot of those images, especially the newer ones, we shot with the Gigoto strobes, and I'm using the Frank Dorhoff flash bender there and the magnetic system, but also of course that fiber umbrella, really nice stuff. Another thing that a lot of people ask me about, like, hey Frank, you shoot tethered, where do you shoot to? I'm shooting to the iPad Pro. And on the iPad Pro, I'm using Cascable. Cascable is an app you can buy in the App Store. It's about 65 bucks, I believe, and it's worth every cent. It doesn't do a lot more than just tether. It gives you, of course, a calculation for star trails, for double exposures, focus stacking, I believe. But most of all, it just tethers, and it's incredibly fast. And you can also set up if you want a second monitor to just show your image or just mirror those images. So for the iPad, it's actually pretty cool that you can do that, because the iPad, let's be honest, it doesn't is so much prone to dust or moisture as your laptop. It isn't as expensive as your laptop, and of course the battery life and screen brightness is a lot better from the iPad than from a normal laptop. Another product that I really can't live without actually is Calibrite, and those are the color checkers. So we always use a color checker when we change our lighting, and then we create a custom profile. Now a lot of people go like, hey, if you create a custom profile, doesn't that take away your creativity? It actually doesn't. It gives you more creativity, because if my images are always exactly the same in the base, I can just build one preset that I really like and use that over and over again and have a solid workflow. And after that I can still change stuff, but at least I don't have to figure out like, hey, how do those colors work? It just speeds up your workflow a lot. For tethering ourselves, we're using IQ wires. IQ Wire is one of the brands that really stands out by design and by, of course, also by technology, because they are one of the first that I worked with a 10-meter cable that's 33 feet without losing my connection, and I'm still using the same cable after 2 years, and that never happened with me before. Normally my tether cables we replaced about every 6 or 7 months, and that's my problem, of course, because, well, we use them almost daily and also outside and in different locations. And having 10 meters in one piece just saves you a lot of trouble and a lot of frustrations also. And really good cables, and also angled connectors and 2 boosters. And very soon they have a new product out, which we will incorporate into our workflow, of course, too, and show you as soon as it's out. And you already saw it a few times during the presentation, is our amazing backdrops from Click Backdrops. It's an UK firm. It's run by photographers and for photographers. So you know that those backdrops are absolutely awesome. I even have a hat from them. So yeah, we are the distributor for those brands, by the way. So I have to be totally honest with you guys. Click Backdrops, IQ Wire, Calibrite, Rogue, and of course Gikoto are also our brands. The thing is, I support them anyway, even if they aren't our brands, because they are our brands, because I believe in them and I just love their products. So we want to sell those products. It's not the other way around. And I don't believe in that. I believe that you have to sell something because it's awesome and not because you need money. That's the wrong way of selling it. And that will be a short-lived period. With us, we try to build trust with you guys, so you know that if we promote something, it's really worth its money. Okay. Thank you, John. Super stuff. Awesome. Okay, let's continue because we have to go a little bit faster now. Special props, like for example, Venetian blinds. They can be awesome, but they can be very, very tricky. For example, I started out with this. Didn't like it at all. Okay. But then I started doing it more with close lighting. So close lighting doesn't mean light close to the Venetian blinds. That's the trick. You have to place the light very far away, and then you can create those really hard shadows. And then Venetian blinds are just awesome. You can buy them very cheaply, get them in different colors, but most of all get them in a nice width, because the width is very important if you want to shoot in the scene. If you don't shoot in the scene, then you can get them a little bit shorter and save money. But I found out the really wider ones are just awesome because you have so much more options to walk around them. And you can use them also as a backdrop. It's just crazy what you can do with that stuff. So many different options. You just have to see it. Now, this was during one of the workshops, and this is a room divider we bought on a flea market for, I think, about 10 euros or 7.50 euros. And during one workshop, I said, you know what, let's try out with one prop how many options we have. And this was all shot during one workshop. So using light behind, using it as a reflective part on the backdrop. You don't see it yet, but we're using it more as a side light. You see where we're going here. Place the model behind it, also cool. This was actually what we did with the previous one, but then a little bit less obvious. You know, it's a little bit in between. Look at the difference. You can already see that there's a little bit on the backdrop, but here we're using it full blast on the backdrop. Or a little bit more like a movie scene when she's looking over it. But we weren't done yet. Zoom out a little bit more and create this. And at that point I had to stop the workshop because it was already 4:30 and normally our workshops are till 4. And I still had 3 or 4 more ideas. So don't think about something I can only use it one way. Try to find different ways to use it. Or for example, organza material. Throw it over your model, maybe use a little bit of a wind machine, and you can create some really cool images. Now with those images, 99% will fail and look terrible. Even when I shoot it, when I shoot 100 of those images, 99 will look terrible. But there's one where you go like, wow, this is amazing. I love that. A simple staircase, a ladder in your studio. You can have so much fun with that. Or just material again, bends, I don't know how to call this, Slierten. And in this case again, that material, you know, that you found on your grandpa and grandma's couch because they didn't want to hurt the couch. Well, that's the material Nadine is wearing here. So it doesn't have to cost a lot. This is actually garbage bags. White and black ones. These are postage bags. Christmas wrapping paper. Just using smoke in a set. Using, I believe, windows curtains. So, yeah, I think those were windows curtains. And just big ropes from a boat. Or if your intern really doesn't want to be on the camera, we borrowed a suit for her. Because this is one of the things that I want to do. Every time we have an intern, and we have an intern that studies to become a photographer, one of their assignments is actually to be in front of my camera at least once. Because I want to know how a model feels in front of my camera. So I think it's important for an intern to also learn this. And this way you prevent that you get those really weird coaching like, yeah, do this, do that. Now it doesn't look right. Because the model is in front of your camera and she's already nervous. If you start bitching about this doesn't work, this isn't right, that doesn't really work for your photo shoot. You have to make sure that the model is at ease and everything just goes like a flow. And at that point it works to be in front of the camera at least once so you know how scary it is. It isn't really scary. Masks and faces. Of course, when you take away the face, the only thing left are the eyes. And that means that you can create some stunning images. And it saves a lot of work on Photoshop, by the way, if you have a model with bad skin. You can also place the model on top of her head. Create some really funky masks. Create some poses that enhance the mask. Or maybe use face covering instead of masks. As you can see here. Use the mask as a prop to look through. Or very small. Close the eyes. Or use again face covering. Maybe use some material that you have just to make the model look through. Why not? Add a little bit of downward looking to create a tension with a hoodie and a mask. Create something really nasty. In this case, by the way, if I would have shot it now, I would have made the light way darker. And probably a little bit of a red lens flare from the side. And then just make her look up just a little bit. And just create that really nice, tense, unease feeling. You can also make your model scream, of course. Or use your plants. This was a fake plant, by the way. Or use face covering again. There's so much you can do with the face, and that's why we show this. This, by the way, is again the same material that you saw before in the dress. The material that you find on your grandfather's couch. Do not hurt the couch, remember. This was actually shot during the professional imaging a few years ago, and Nadine was behind me with a blowtorch and using the plastic to create on the spot face coverings. And look at this. This was literally done on stage with a lot of people looking. All done in 5 or 6 minutes. It's amazing, right? Again, masks or glasses. And the trick with glasses, by the way, a lot of people ask me, like, do you take the glasses out? No. Because people are used to seeing somebody with glasses, with the distortion of those glasses. So if you take the glasses out, it doesn't look right? And you want a little bit of, you want to see that there's glass in there. You don't want to see that it's fake. The trick is, angle of incidence is angle of reflection. So when you shoot somebody with glasses, it can help to just make her look a little bit down. And just place your light a little bit higher and shoot from another angle. So just hold your camera and look at this. So I have this a LED light here, and as you see now probably in my eyes you can see the LED light, but if I do this or change my angle a little bit, you will see that it totally controls how I see that reflection in my glass. And of course I have two, that it doesn't really work that way. But you know what I mean, right? Change the angles and the reflection will be gone. And then you can shoot glasses without any reflections. But the cool thing is, you don't want to shoot them without any reflections. You just want a little bit in there on het montuur, on the sides of the glasses, and just a little bit on the glass piece itself. That gives you that nice real feeling. I love shooting that stuff. Or in this case, just a big lollipop. And of course the weird glasses. Look at that. We always go to flea markets and we find weird stuff, like for example glasses or heads, or maybe a little necklace. There's so much stuff that you can find for just a penny or €1 or maybe even less on flea markets, and you can use them all the time in your photo shoots or combine them in your photo shoots. And glasses are awesome. As you can see here, they really make the difference between a shot that's boring or a shot that's interesting. In this case, the glasses, for me, it creates that summery feeling, although I'm using very dark lighting, but it's like she's against a graffiti wall with a spotlight straight on her. And this, of course, is outside. Now, outside, the glasses have a different purpose. Now, when you're shooting a model in bright sunlight, you can get those really nasty raccoon eyes. The other option is make your model look up, and then they will go like, whoa, this is bright. Let them wear sunglasses. One, they look cool. Two, you can now make your model look up and create some really nice lens flares, or sorry, flares in the glasses. Or you can just create something that looks like this with stark black and white, leather jacket, black glasses, black hair. It just creates a really nice combination. In this case, we're using paint, but as you can see here, the eyes stay away with paint with the eyes. And in this case, we're using actually water paint, but we made it a little bit thicker. Somebody saw this and did the same thing, and they used the wrong paint, and that is a problem, because if you have that in your hairs or on your skin, it doesn't wash out easily. So always make sure that you test it out on your own skin first, and if you can take it off easily, just leave it on for 10 or 20 minutes, and if you still can take it off easily, then you can use it on your model. But in all honesty, I would not do it again. So this went okay, but it was a lot of problems to get the paint just a nice thickness, and in the end it ended up with a lot of lumps in the paint. So this was very lucky. Okay, locations. Locations can be in your studio. In this case, we call this the plantenbak in the Netherlands, but it's actually where in the past we have our studio is an old church. It's not really a church, but it was used as a church. And this was actually one of the areas where they had these nice little plants. So of course we took the plants out and we just put a little bit of covering on it, and now we can place our model on it and just light it from the top, have two nice leading lines and create something interesting. So locations can be anywhere. It can be in the tulips or just besides our studio. Besides here is actually our RV. So these are our gates, literally. And we just low angle, just aiming up, overpowering the sun to create a really nice contrasty light. And sometimes you're lucky. This was in, I believe, Las Vegas, Nevada. And let me see where this was. Yes, it was in Vegas. And they took us out to a little village, and it was actually a village where they shot a movie with Nicolas Cage, and they just left the plane there. And our model, by accident, had white wings, and I had only one strobe. It was a very powerful strobe with a maxi light on it. So we placed the strobe actually just outside of the frame, just blasted the model, and that actually created a little bit of a day to night effect, but because the sun was so bright, I couldn't get it darker than this. And then later on when I looked at the image, I said maybe it's better that way, because now you get this nice balance instead of going all overboard with day to night, which is so easy to do with an image like this. But I actually like it this way. This was shot a few weeks ago during a workshop in a really old church, so a real church. And they literally had these speakers set up. And this is one of the things that I want to give you guys as an advice. I'm never so hard on people wanting to use my images. I always go like, hey, if you want to use my image, that's great. Just place my name under it, you know. This went a little bit differently. And I don't say it's bad, but I got this email like, hey, the guy who owns the speakers really like your images. He wants to use them. Is that okay? So I said, just let him email me. And I got this email and it literally said like, can you send me the images so I can use them? And at that point I had something like, hey, wait a minute. No. Because if I would have done this as a commercial job, it would have cost you a boatload of money. At least ask me like, hey, Frank, I really love your images. Would you mind if I use them? Instead of just saying like, hey, give me your images. Those images have value, you know. So just email them like, hey, we're not going to do it like this. He said, well, my logo is on the speakers. I said, okay, no problem. I can go into Photoshop and take your logos out. In the end, we worked everything out. I gave him the images for free. The only thing I wanted to give really nice as a message to him, those images aren't free. Yes, they are already made, but they're not free. If you are allowed to use them, say thank you. It sounds weird, right? But we all know it as photographers. If we go to a shooting day with a model, who pays? The photographer, right? The model not, the makeup artist not, it's always the photographer that pays. If you make images, it's always like, hey, give me the raw files, give me this. Our images have value. So if somebody like this person wants to use my images, of course that's allowed. But do know that they have value. So if you ask those images, you literally just say like, hey, I love those images, can I please use them? Huge difference. And let's be honest, they look nice. Now, during professional imaging, Sony actually asked me like, hey, Anouk, are you going?
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Doeg.
This is Anouk, my wife, of course you know that, probably. She has a ladies' night with my mom, so... Yeah, behave. Behave. Yeah. So Sony asked me like, hey, can you take some images of the booth? And I was just going like, yeah, sure. Always surprise your client. So I could have taken some images with my phone or with the camera, but I thought, you know what, let's do it a little bit more interesting and also give those guys a few nice images. And you know, with those images, you create so much more than just the booth. You create character, you create a story. And I think the story, photographers are storytellers, right? So always tell that story. Reflections are really cool. Like for example, a mirror. But the difference with mirrors are that some mirrors, when you use glass, they actually have this really nasty double reflection, which you don't want. These are plastic mirrors. Just find them online. They're called plastic mirrors. Literally in the Netherlands, you can also find them on the kunststof spiegels. Dus kunststof spiegels. And those only have one reflection. They aren't really cheap, but they're way cheaper than a normal mirror. And they just look awesome. And especially when you choose the right backdrop, like in this case, the backdrop really just runs through. I just love those reflections here. Look at that. We should have a whole workshop based on reflections. We're going to work with mirrors and plexiglass on the floor with seamless and of course like this running through backdrops. It's going to be a really interesting workshop. It's the first time I'm going to teach it, so I'm really looking forward to it. As you can see here, this is what I like. You can see the line, of course, on the top, but it just looks like it's one big part, like the model is floating. I really like that look. Okay, light itself. Light itself can be used creatively if you know how. In this case, we're using it behind our Pro fabrics. Now, as you can see here, our model is just standing on the top of her feet. It's just a fun pose. But the idea was actually like, hey, we love this Pro fabric from Click Backdrops. And when I look through it, I can see some light coming through it. Why not place your lighting behind it? This is one of the things that during workshops I often found in students that they are afraid to do stuff that isn't according to the books. And nobody places the light against the backdrop, Frank. Why? Well, maybe it looks nice, or behind the backdrop, of course. Maybe it looks nice. And then when you look at something like this, you go like, okay, it's not perfect, but there is something that we can work with. So a few weeks later, I did this. And this works way better. Because if I want to set up this normally, you know the problem? When you want that light to be even across your model, you can never do that. Because the only option you have is aim that light then from the top down. And then even you will get this. If you do it from the side, one side will be lighter than the other side and it will stretch out. So having a light like symmetrical, no, I told you I don't do symmetrical, that's one of the reasons. But with Pro Fabric, when I place my light exactly behind my backdrop, now I have this nice symmetrical circle. So now I can do something that I normally couldn't do. And you can also tone the effect down, as you can see here. Many options. Again, and we did that before, but I want to incorporate it here again. Use your lighting in a different way. And this is also ring light. In my personal opinion, don't do this on full blast, because those ring lights really emit a lot of power. So this was on the lowest setting, of course, to save the model's eyes. Why not light from the top down? I know from the bottom down doesn't really work, but from the top down you can really get some interesting images, almost like a street lantern going down. Now, of course, those shadows will be really enhanced. So what I like to do with this is actually make the model look up, and you can really catch the light in those eyes. It's not a normal pose. It's not something that you would give to your parents or to your grandparents, but it is a cool shot. It gives a little bit of a movie vibe. And of course you can also use lighting as lens flares. And of course I'm using that black diffusion filter, which gives me a little bit more of that blown out areas. But think about this, lens flare is literally a mood maker. In the 70s they used it a lot. Nowadays lens flare is actually something that's a dirty word. You use coatings on your lenses to prevent it. There's all this stuff like, hey, there's lens flare in this lens. Why not embrace those old lenses, those lenses with artifacts? With a little bit of a vignetting, with a little bit of a discolor. It gives character to your images. And of course, there are times when everything needs to be neutral and perfect, but sometimes you don't want it. Now, one of the solutions to get great lens flares is actually buy old M42 lenses, those screw lenses. Those are awesome, especially when you go for Zeiss or Jena or, what's the other one? Takamura. Those are absolutely awesome. What I normally do is I will find the zebras. So those are silver with black, silver and black. Now those you can use on a Sony camera in autofocus mode, believe it or not. There are converters from PhotoDiox and TechArt that will make it autofocus by just moving the lens up and down. Or you can do it manually. Now if you don't want to do that, don't worry, K&F Concept, and there are also other brands out there, but I'm using the K&F Concept. They use a filter called the black diffusion filter. I sometimes call it the black mist filter. It's a filter which has black nano dots on it, so your highlights will blow out very, very nicely, but the sharpness will be retained for 99.9%. So I have the filter on my camera all the time, I never take it off, and then as soon as I start using lens flares or backlighting, I take my sun hood off, and you get this nice creamy lens flare. It's not that it makes the lens flare a lot bigger, it makes it a little bit bigger, but it takes out that nasty, you can see those areas sometimes where you can literally just see the blades of your lens and you go like, this looks bad. So in Photoshop you take it out. With those filters you don't have to anymore. So check those out. Light on the backdrop with color is also very important. Just look at this. This is all with the backlight on, and now we turn the light off. Look at the difference. It really creates a totally different look in your shot. And Norena was very good in standing so still for those two shots. They literally are shot next to each other. But as you can see, totally different look. I love them both, but this is again the tip. Try to experiment with strobes on and strobes off. But also aim your light straight into the camera. Why not? A lot of people are afraid of it, but it can create so many beautiful images. Or just use a light bulb. It doesn't have to be difficult, guys. Light bulbs, chandeliers. I'm not using strobes in these images. These are all shot on auto ISO, minimum shutter speed of 125, 2.8, aim at the camera and just shoot. And it can create some stunning images, as you can see here. And of course you can use strobes a little bit to just open up the shadows, but then use your strobes with modeling lights. Big softbox modeling light, and then just turn it down just to open up the shadows a little bit, because otherwise you will get a little bit of noise in Lightroom. We don't want noise, of course, if you can prevent it. So use a LED panel or your modeling light to just open up those shadows to prevent any noise. Candles and a lot of smoke. I just love using smoke with stuff like this. And by the way, here we use Boris FX to get a little bit more of those candles. And if you don't know Boris FX is a software package. I highly recommend you guys checking it out. I did some videos on it and it's unique. It's literally unique in the form of, you have a lot of software that adds lens flares, you have a lot of software that adds atmospherical effects, but often they are standing still. So you just move them around, you make them bigger or smaller, and that's it. With Boris FX, if you go to smoke, for example, or particles, you can literally just move a slider and you will see a whole movie with those particles moving around. You can change everything around it. You can make it three-dimensional and you can just place it in your image exactly where you want, mask it out, and it's stunning. I've never seen anything like it before. It's not an overlay. That's something that I hate because it always looks the same. It's not replacing something. No, it's literally adding it to the scene and adding light. So Boris FX, check it out without any doubt. Another thing that I love to do is when somebody sends me gear, I will always try to do a review, written or video. I will take a lot of images with it, but I will also take images with the product in the image, meaning a lot of the images that you see in brochures, they say that this is shot with. And then you see the product against a white backdrop and you go like, okay, this is the product. But it doesn't really excite you, right? The image excites you, the product not. But if you try to combine those. So in other words, show the product in the image. It will often excite a photographer especially a lot more. In other words, if I see Steve Vai without guitar and then against the white seamless, his guitar next to it, doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense at all. But when I say Steve Vai with the guitar, I go like, hey, this makes sense. It's a connection, right? Now, I know that normally light sources shouldn't be in the frame, but look at this. Isn't this just awesome to just include at least one of those light sources in the frame? A little bit of smoke, of course. We love smoke. And the nice thing is that the manufacturer, in this case Non-Light, they keep sending me these lights for the very simple reason they love the images. And I'm always very clear about this. If you send me gear, there are two options. I can send it back to you, or we keep it and we keep using it. Now, in 99% of the cases, the gear is left in our studio because we create so many images with it. But as a tip for you guys, even if you don't get your gear for a review, and trust me, we don't get a lot of gear for review. It's literally most of the times it's just what we already use that we review, of course. But let's say that you have this beautiful light source and you just bought it and you go like, wow, this looks amazing and I love the light quality. Why not do a few shots like this, what I did here? Just shoot it with that light source in the image. One, you yourself love those images, right? Send it to the manufacturer. I kid you not, in 99% of the cases you won't hear anything back and you go like, wow. But in 1% of those cases you will probably get an email back and go like, man, I love your images, can we work together? This is how for me everything started. I got the D-lights from Ellingram, I shot an image with it and just put a text in it. The D-lights are a steal, send it to Ellingram, and Ellingram only responded back like, hey, there's a hyphen in between D-lights. And I was going, oh, sorry. So I put it in between and send it again. And then they asked me like, hey, can I use this image? And I was going like, oh, wow, yeah, sure, use it. And that's how everything started. Scott Kelby saw the advert for the D-lights. He found out my work, started following my work, and a few years later I was the first European Kelby 1 trainer. So by sending in an image to a company unannounced, by just, hey, I love your product, this is an image I shot with it, sometimes it can work out really well for you. So just try it. Christmas lighting bought at AliExpress. You can buy a lot of lighting from AliExpress. It's very, very cheap. And it doesn't work, by the way, very well. If you want something that works, buy it somewhere else. But if you just want to use it for a photo shoot once or twice, like these worked, I think 3 or 4 times, and then they already quit. And you can create some really cool stuff with it, especially on the floor like this. It just does something else to a shot, you know? It's not standard. You remember those branches that I told you about that we use over and over again? These are the same branches, only now we're shooting through them, giving a totally different look. I hope you guys enjoy it so far. We're almost done, by the way, don't worry. But we're going a little bit over time. Same here, I'm using the ice light and a lot of Christmas lighting and continuous lighting on the sides. There's no strobes in this shot. Same here, LED lighting from Non-Light. This is actually how it started. I believe those panels were the first batch they sent me, if I could use them for video and if I would do a small promo video for them. So I did the promo video and I actually sent these shots. And I think they were more happy with the shots than with the promo video. Promo video was good, but the shots they really liked. And I found a lot of them in the brochure the next year. So that's nice. Shooting through the chandelier. As you can see here, by using different angles, I can create different effects with the chandelier. Going overboard by shooting through the crystals or having the crystals on the side and just the face through. Guys, there's so much you can do with creativity. Don't hold yourself back. Expression is the same thing, and a good model helps here. Felisa is an awesome model for expression, as you can see here. But you really have to push your models to get this. It's acting at 1/10,000th of a second. It's not hard, you might think, but it's all those images are captured, so a smile looks nice. On a photo, you have to do it in one click. That's way more difficult than doing it in a movie. Now, of course, an actor is an actor, right? And movies are difficult because you have to learn your lines. But in essence, getting that story on a photo is, in my opinion, way more difficult than doing it in a movie, because you have the instruments playing in the backdrop. You have the mood already set by the story. you have the movement, you have the camera movement, and with photography it's only one image. So this is why I scout models that are very expressive, have eyes that really shine, and of course are not afraid in front of the camera. And Felisa isn't afraid in front of the camera, as you can see here. This was shot during our cosplay workshop with a horror team. So during Halloween and that kind of stuff, we always do something really weird. And in this case, by the way, you might wonder like, hey, those laughs are really nice. How the heck does he do this? Felisa is really easy for me to get laughing hysterically. So I always do this during workshops when I need that really nice expression. I try to make her laugh like really, really bad. And sometimes she ends up on the floor, like you can see here. And you know, those images are real. This is not fake. When you laugh, a lot of people think that you laugh with your mouth. You don't. You laugh with your eyes, with your nose, with your hairs, and the mouth just follows. So if you only laugh with your mouth, it looks terrible. But if you laugh with your eyes and not with your mouth, it already looks great. So when you make a model laugh, don't make her laugh here. Just go like, don't laugh. Don't laugh. Be serious. Come on. Don't laugh. And then people will start laughing, and then you have that really nice stuff. Okay. Expression is everything, as you can see here. But expressions can also be a little bit more toned down. I just love them both. Motion, of course. Motion can be still, like this. But as soon as you start adding, of course, you can then change your angles and use wide angles. But as soon as I get it, like, okay, now I'm done. I have my images. Now I know where I place my focus. I know which angles I like. I like the lighting this way. Let's start adding some real motion. Look at this. So we made her hair wet, made her turn around and add that really nice hook towards me. A lot of those images, again, will go wrong and will be worse than the ones that are posed for the very simple reason. With the post image, you can go low, you can just position yourself perfectly and take the shot. With this, it's a motion and you have to be exactly at the right moment, at the right time. Make sure that the light is hitting it correctly. Like here, the light is just a little bit too much on the side. On the other hand, that also makes it real, right? And here I got it right. So after a few times you get it right. Same here, just a little bit of flick of motion. Or just throw some stuff at your model. Make sure you don't hurt her, of course. Unless you hate her, but mostly no. Flower, and with flower be very careful, because you have something called, I believe it's called kinetic energy, where when you throw flour you get a lot of kinetic energy and oxygen, and it's a vital mix that's very dangerous. So if you do this, make sure that there are no sparks and that you cover your strobes and that there's always something on top that's open. So when we shot this for Calby 1, we were actually doing it in a building that had no roof. In other words, when there's something that goes wrong, the explosion can go up. Luckily everything went right, but we had proper fire brigade there. So I never knew how dangerous it was. They explained it to me and I was going like, I don't want to do this anymore. I said, no, if we do it like this, it's fine, but don't do it in a confined space. And I mentioned this because especially a few years ago, you saw a lot of those flower workshops where they go into a tiny studio, throw around flour and then take photos with strobes that aren't the best quality. So sometimes there will be a little bit of spark. And I always wondered, like, how long will it take before we read in a newspaper that a studio exploded? And again, I didn't know it before they explained it to me, but it seems to be very dangerous. So be careful. And of course you can do it with water, freezing the motion. Now what you have to realize with strobes is as long as you make sure that the studio is dark. So how do I do this? I always take my trigger from the camera so the strobe doesn't fire. I take a picture on the setting that I want to use. So let's say, for example, f16 125th of a second. I take the picture and I have to make sure that the whole frame is black. Now if the whole frame is black, I have no problem at all. I put the strobe on and I just fire, and at that moment on 125th of a second, believe it or not, everything will be frozen for the very simple reason the strobe is a pulse. And it doesn't really matter if I use 1 second or 2 seconds or 10 seconds, as long as it's dark, the model will be frozen. Now if I can't get it 100% dark on f16 on 125th of a second, you might say, hey, you can use something called high-speed sync. With freezing motion, that doesn't really give you the effects that you want. So if you can't get it dark enough, postpone the shoot or try to get it as dark as possible. Or just go higher up, f22, or use ND filters in front of your lens. As long as your strobes can handle it, you can go up. But you have to make sure with freezing motion, there's no ambient light. And the reason for this, and you probably 1 or 2 times experienced this, if the ambient light is still there, you get this nasty black outline around your model. So if somebody moves a hand, the hand is frozen, but you see this nasty black outline, and that's your ambient light. Remember this, everything is black, boom, the strobe goes off. Your hand is frozen, everything is black again. So you see black, 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 hand is frozen, black. Depending on how much ambient light, that can be really annoying. Now, of course, everything that you learned today, you can also use in product photography. Now, I'm not a great product photographer. I really am not. We do a lot of product photography in our studio, and we do it okay. All our clients are happy with it. But for me personally, I always think like, hey, fashion photography, I know a little bit about. Product photography, there are experts out there, but I try my best. What I try to do is incorporate stories. So when X-Rite asked me like, hey Frank, can you take some images with the color checker? I immediately started thinking like, hey, funny faces of the color checker. Every time when I shoot a color checker, I have my model point at it or hold it in front or make a funny face. Actually, during workshops, we always tell our model, make a funny face, otherwise the software won't work. It's hilarious. So I started doing the color checker images, and I just love shooting products because it's different from models. So I thought, you know what, maybe they don't want it with models all the time. So let's use it in my home studio setup, because there we also take images, right? And then I had like, you know what, this is fun. Let's do some more product photos. And then last year I was approached by Sony, and of course I'm a Sony ambassador. But what a lot of people probably don't know is Anouk and I also run a home theater company. So this is where our color management comes from. I'm an ISF trained technician, so that means that we do calibrations for projectors, TVs, video walls and whatnot more. So that's a nice connection with photography, of course. And Sony, we deliver a lot of their projectors to our clients because they're awesome, right? Epson, Sony, JVC, those projectors are really great for home theater. And they had this new one out, the WV70 and the WV5000. I was just going like, those look really nice, but they weren't on the market yet. So they gave me dummies. Take photos with those. And it could be a white backdrop, but you know what, let's do it slightly different. And when I think about the movie theater, I think about somehow a little bit of a smoky area, and you're not allowed to smoke in the movies anymore, of course, but you all have that feeling, right? When you see a movie, it's a little bit of smoke with lights coming out, light beams. I don't know why. Maybe it's because when you think about the movies, you think about all those red carpets outside where there's a little bit of mist and smoke machines and lighting, maybe that combination. So I started doing this, but the thing was, when you bought the projectors in that period, you got free earbuds or headphones. So we try to incorporate those too. It's more about the earbuds in combination with the projector. And of course the black one, the 7000, was amazing to shoot like this. But I also like to have some lines on the logo. And the more I started shooting them, as you can see here, the more I progressed. And in one photo shoot, I went from the boring white one, looking for what the heck can I do with this? There's no connection, you see? You have the product, you have some light in the back, some smoke. It's nice. But then when you go through these images, we have way more connection with the product. And that's only in like 15 or 20 minutes. So learn your product and start to work towards a more storytelling and connecting image. As you can see here. Of course, when you shoot our own products, we try to incorporate it with a white backdrop for easy use for example, our dealers. But I also like to do it like this. For example, an IQ wire cable. You don't just want a white backdrop. No, you want to see how the cable is connected to your camera, how nice and easy that angled connector walks. Or you want to see how the cable block is connected, right? You want to see that little lip where you can open it up. You want to see how it's connected to your camera and not just laying on a white backdrop. So that's why I always try to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more focus effect. I'm using all those things that I learned from model photography in our product photography. And then at one point we had this competition on our forum, the home theater forum, and they actually built stands for speakers. Now stands, if you don't know anything about music production, stand is where you place your speakers on. And especially with music production, we're using near field monitors. So those monitors are really close to your ears, or not close to your ears, they're about maybe a meter away from me now. And with normal audio, you listen totally different than with music mastering. We have to make sure that everything is without any interference. So coupling or decoupling your speakers is very important. And they gave me these stands to shoot, and they were also the price of the competition. And I was just going like, you know, I can place them again against a white backdrop, but why not incorporate them? Like, for example, here we're using a headphone and a guitar in the back. And I liked it, but you couldn't really see those were the speaker stands, right? So I said, why not just place a speaker on it, place a microphone there, headphones, guitar in the back. And then I started shooting more of my guitar gear because I really got fun with it, you know. And this was also, these were shot during the pandemic, by the way. So you didn't have a lot to do, so we just shot them like this. Now, the pedals is a different story, and this is one of the things that I always try to teach in my workshops. Give and get back. These pedals were built by a Dutch builder, and the reason I found out is I have a Carvin V3 and I wanted to have that repaired and modified. And I bought it to him and I saw his pedals and I was going like, hey, I really like those pedals. And I saw the images on his website and they weren't really great. So I was going like, hey, you know what? You're going to repair my amp. It's going to be an expensive repair. If you're going to give me some of those pedals, I will make some images for you and maybe we can work something out like a deal. At first he wasn't really interested about it because he thought his images looked great. And then I started sending him these images. And in the end, I did pay a little bit for the modification of my amp, but I got a killer deal. Way more discount than I would ever earn from making those images, let me put it that way. And he ended up by using this one. And the cool thing is that this one was actually shot during the photo fair. And I did all these product photos of his pedals against the white backdrop, of course, and then we started doing with the red velvet and the smoke and the colors. And I also brought the pedals during the demos, and I just told my model, like, hold the pedal just in front, using a wide angle, leading line, and using props, smoke, and a proper backdrop. You see how everything just comes together. I never intended it to be a commercial shot. He saw the image, I said, can you make it a little bit more brighter, like blown out? So I did a proper retouch on it, a different retouch, and we ended up with this one. You never know how you're gonna get your clients. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. We do have some extra things that I have to mention from Week, so let me grab that for now. Let me see. Our next digital classroom is a live shoot, and it's on December 13. Let me switch over to this one, by the way. It's a little bit nicer. There we go. Okay, so the next digital classroom is on December 13, and it's called Modifiers. Oh, I remember what that one is. You guys always ask me like, hey Frank, what does a modifier do? What's your favorite modifier? During that live broadcast, I'm going to show you all the modifiers we use. Snoots, flash benders, magnetic system, gels, strip lights, grids, softboxes, Fresnel, probably also continuous lighting, beauty dish. We're going to go through all of them really fast, and we're going to show you from every single light source what it can do, how you can use it, and how you can set it up, and all the weak spots and the, of course, strong points. On February 4th, we have an open day. That's only for, of course, you can also come if you're English or German or whatever language, but it will be in Dutch. It's our open house. It's on February 4th. It's on a Sunday. We're just going to show you our products. We're going to show you our studio. And during the day, I do 2 live demos. And those live demos are 100% interactive. You can ask questions. You can do whatever you want during the seminar in interrupting me. Like, hey, can you change the light over? Can you use a different backdrop? I'm there for you guys. It's our open house. It's not a workshop. It's literally, if you ask me something, I will do it. So if you have a problem with lighting, come to our open house and then book a workshop, maybe with some discounts. We never know what we do during our open house. And of course, on April 16 to 23, and that's really interesting for a lot of guys, we will be in Spain. I will do a workshop there. It's a 2-day workshop in the studio. But we also have a VIP arrangement where you get way more. So we go to a market, we go to the Spanish Hollywood, we go to street photography, we do portfolio reviews and a 2-day workshop in our studio. If you want more information, just drop me an email because we are in the planning stages of that. In the end, the price will be 100% inclusive. So a full week, I believe, is $15.99, and that's including, so listen to this. This is including your stay in a nice home. You get catering, drinks, snacks. So food is all arranged, and your sleeping arrangement is arranged, the workshops is arranged, and transport is arranged. The only thing you have to do is fly in and probably rent a car to get there, because the closest airport is, I believe, 90 minutes away. But maybe you can combine stuff. So that's why we say just drop us an email, because then we maybe can combine some stuff for you guys. And of course, there will be an Ultimate Weekend next year, but due to Corona, we're a little bit scared to do it in the winter time because, well, an Ultimate Weekend, if that gets cancelled, it will cost me a lot of money. And when people fly in, we can't cancel. So that's a big problem for us. So in the summer, we will do another Ultimate Weekend instead of in the winter. Okay, I think that was all. If there are no questions in the chat, are there any questions in the chat? Feel free to ask. And I hope we get a lot of subscribers on YouTube after this, because you really support our channel. Now, if you don't want to subscribe to our channel, if you don't want to do Patreon, if you go like, Frank, we don't want to spend any money on you, but we do want to help you, share our links from our videos. Tell other people about our channel so we can grow, but most of all, subscribe to our channel. That's free, 100% free. I think that's a little bit weird with YouTube. They have the subscriber section that's actually paid, and you can subscribe to our channel. So maybe become a member or subscriber. Subscribing is free, so that also helps us out. Thank you so very much for watching, guys, and I see you again next time. Stay creative, stay shooting.